So these are the things usually a rural female would take when she goes on a journey, and that is a journey that she does not expect to return to the village. So she's going for good. And look at the things she has taken, and we find some cooking vessels even, and then some provisions, the savings, and also some money as well, right? So we know that they have taken, I think, about 16, yeah, 16 rupees. 3 rupees of our own, 3 that Selvam had given us out of his earnings, 10 rupee note Kenny had sent through Selvam, and then she counted it and tucked it in securely at my waist. And this word is important, securely. And she thinks that her money will be very safe there at her waist. And after that, they were ready. So they had to take quite a lot, even though they are not valuable things. And these things are quite important. That's their wealth. Quite important to these people. And after that, we find, their departure. Right, a bullock cart lumbers up, and then cart is piled high with bales of tightly packed skins. So they are passengers on a return journey, and then there is enough room for both of them. And then when it is a time to leave, Selvam steps back, and their daughter comes forward. She's holding her son by the hand, and then the 3 of them were waiting, standing there to see them on their way. So here we don't find like they are crying, but anyway, all of them are quite sad because they are not sure whether they will see each other again sooner or later, or ever see each other again. Right, so after that we find how they set out. Right, so we will skip this part. And Carter is already asleep. But anyway, bullocks know the route well. And even without the coaxing of the carter, they are able to find their way. So they are familiar with this route because they have taken this route many times before. And even without his guidance, the bullocks keep to the track. And also, I think I pointed out this to you. One of the bullocks has a large raw patch on its shoulder where the yoke has rubbed the skin off. The animal is not well, I say to the man. He shrugs. What can I do? I have no other. I must make these trips since they are my livelihood. Right, so he too is helpless. So the bullock is injured, There's a wound on its shoulder, so it must be quite painful for the animal. But however, the carter did not have any other choice but to use the same animal, and he can't spare the animal. That is their destiny. So here the destiny of the bullock is similar to the destiny of these poor villagers. And so they too are like beasts of burden. So they have to carry their dead weight no matter what happens. No matter whether they are sick or whether they are well, with what happens, right, in good times and in bad times, they have to carry their burden, right? So the destiny of the bullock is similar to the destiny of these poor villagers. Right then, so after that, once again we find details of the journey. So they have reached the outskirts of the city, and it was mid-afternoon. So the city is not named in the novel. We never learn the name of the city, but they know the city. They have reached the outskirts, suburbs of the city. And then the carter said that that is as far as he can take them. Right. And uh, and the carter was complaining. We are late. I should have got here by morning if only this bullock means the injured one, the bullock with a wound on its shoulder. So it cannot hurry up. So it kept a very slow pace. So the carter was complaining about the bullock. And after that, he lifted the yoke just prior to watering his animals. And Rukmani was able to notice that raw patch, the wound, and it had begun to fester. No, it has uh, become bad, infected now because the wound is not treated, but it was forced to bear the yoke, carry the, draw the cart. So more skin had been eaten away, and trickles of blood were running down the edges. So that is the plight of this beast of burden. This animal will soon be fit for nothing, he muttered to himself. Heaven knows when I shall be able to afford another. Right, the animal will soon be fit for nothing because when it can't work, it is considered useless. So then he complains that he won't be able to have another. I shall be. Heaven knows when I shall be able to afford another. So his poverty is once again manifested. So he can't have another bullock to replace the wounded one, and then the animal is forced to draw the cart, that heavy cart loads, unto its death. As soon as the animals had drunk, he put the yoke back. The bullock cringed, but accepted the torment. Right? Can you mark this? The bullock cringed in pain, but accepted the torment. And as soon as the whip fell, it began to pull again. And then these bullocks too are like rural Indians, accepting their lot, but not being rebellious, right? Not running away or not refusing to draw the cart, but accepting that torment, acute pain, right? So the it seems that animals too uh, are like they too accept their lot, right? So that is their fate. They know their destiny, right? Perhaps they have understood. So like these peasants, they accept this torment, their burden, but then continue to do their work until they die. So with that, the carter left and they are stranded in the middle of nowhere, right? So they are not sure which turning they should take, not quite sure. There were three turnings before us, and there was no telling which way lay the house of our son. Then Nathan picked up the mats, right? So not quite sure, but took one road. We chose a road at random, but luckily they had taken the right road, right? And then they almost regretted not being able to ask the carter the right direction. And there were two men approaching. Can you direct us to Coil Street, friend? Coil Street, let me see. He put up his hand to scratch his head. This is a gesture indicating that he was not quite sure, scratching his head. But the burden being there, withdrew it. No, I cannot. Brother, can you tell these people what they want to know? And his companion thought, I've heard of it. Yes, I remember now. It's in one of the suburbs of the town, quite away from here. But this is the right road. Now, that too is something that they have taken the right road. And then about 15 miles, they have to cover about 15 miles. A very long distance for tired peasants carrying their burden. Can you please turn off your mics? And we get some disturbing sounds, background noises. Please be kind enough to check your mics. Okay, thank you. So about 15 miles. If you keep to the road, you may get a lift. And then, of course, he had seen their crestfallen faces, right? Because, they were actually disappointed, right? Frustrated. How can they cover that distance? But anyway, they had to plod on, right? So this is not an easy task, but, they had to move on. But then no one was willing to help them. Most of them were fully laden already, and the bundle I carried for that it contained so little grew heavier with each step. So how can that be? All right. So the bundle grew heavier with each step. That is because they are quite tired by this time. And the Rukmani speaks about her discomfort. Neck was stiff with the effort of holding head steady. The bundle was poised on top. So it was carried on top of her head. Under each arm was a cooking pot. So whenever the sweat came trickling down, which happened frequently, it was a hot day. And then they stopped frequently, and her husband too was similarly burdened and troubled more than I was by flies and insects. So their progress was very slow. So the road broadened and then it split, fogged, other roads curled away, and then she found that it was difficult to know whether they were keeping to the right road or not. And now there are so many people walking quickly here and there, and they are focused on their business. And then they were reluctant to stop and ask them the way. And then they noticed the traffic, unlike in the village, traffic like bullock carts, jute cars, and bicycles, more than we had ever seen, many times thicker than in the town around the tannery. So they understand the difference between that small town and a larger town. And of course, they had not been outside their limited world. Now, for the first time, they experience that wider world away from their known world, known, small, limited circle. And then the town was noisy as well. So we find the numerous sounds which can be heard in the city. Not the sound of the birds, not the sound of the wind, but car horns, bicycle bells, cracking of whips, and the deafening, bewildering clamor. Right, so that is considered as a clamor unpleasant, very loud, unpleasant sound, amid which it was impossible to heed every warning sound. Several times we were nearly knocked down by impatient cyclists whose bells we had not heard. So their ears are not tuned to hear these warning signals, warning bells. So they were nearly knocked down by cyclists who are very impatient. Once a jutka almost ran us over. The driver just managed to pull up the hose, and while we stood palpitating, he leaned from his seat, irate and frightened, to shout at us. Right, so he was angry and he shouted at them. His voice was very loud, and he shook his fist as he drove off. Several people stopped to stare at us curiously as we hurried on. So, this is an embarrassing experience, totally new experience. And they are at a complete loss in the city. But anyway, they had to move. And now they had come to the city center. Coil Street lay some 6 miles away. Still, they have to cross about 6 miles. And we were still not sure finding it. And then Rukmani noticed that her husband was very tired. Heat, noise, bustle of the city had taken their toll. And now his walk was very slow. And now and then he stumbled. But anyway, he carried on. And finally, Rukmani said, "Let us rest for a while. It will do us both good." Until then, he carried on. And then he agreed at once. So, this once again like a heroic struggle. And it was difficult. They were carrying things also, and they were harassed by this totally new experience. And then like traffic of the city, right? But anyway, right, he never said that he could not do it, he could not go on, and he should stop. But when Rukmani suggested only, another agreed, and he readily agreed, even though he did not admit that it was not easy for him to continue. So next in this section we find they are resting a little bit, and they were allowed to sit in peace because nobody paid any attention to them. And in the city we can see that all are strangers. Nobody cares what happens to the other person. Okay. And they had not eaten since morning and it's evening. And then they had some plantains which they shared. And the city was about to sleep, and noise was decreasing. And street lights came up. In the shops, gas lamps, hurricane lanterns were lighting up. But that side alley was dark. All right. So finally, they got up, even though resting is like a bliss. But Rukmani now realized that they would not reach their son that night. Now it is too late. It's dusk already, and stars are out in the sky. And they were waiting there undecided with their bundles. And then there was an old man, and Rukmani noticed that old man earlier, thought that he was asleep, but now he came up to them. "Where do you go, friends, at this late hour?" "To Coil Street. Our son lives there. We are going to him." "That is a long way yet. You look tired." "We have rested too well. We should have been on our way long since." And then he gave them an important piece of information. Well, if you do not arrive tonight, there is a temple not far from here where you can eat and sleep. So, this is a valuable bit of information. He pointed. In the distance, we saw the outline of a temple, not too distant, however, with a yellow oil flare burning from the top. We looked, and it seemed to beckon to us, promising food and shelter. That is a welcome sight and welcome news, most welcome news. And there's a place they can rest and then have shelter and food. That is a temple. So it seems that religion came to their help. Ultimately, we are grateful to you. We are tired, as you say. We picked up our possessions and then they walked on. Now their steps are firm because now they have a set destination, somewhere definite, a fixed destination to go. And then they are guided by the yellow flare of the temple that burns so steadily ahead of us, like a signal light, a beckoning light. And now they are getting close to the temple. They notice that there are a lot of people, several people, mostly old and crippled, and they too are heading for the temple. And Rukmani also noticed that many of them were known to one another. For as they hobbled along in ones and twos and sometimes small groups, they exchanged greetings and news. They knew us at once for strangers, perhaps by the bundles we carried, but were not disposed to be unfriendly for that. And they smiled to us, and one or two called out cheerfully, "Are you bound for the temple too?" So they are not that bad, and then gave them friendly smiles. And then they understood that they too were heading for the temple. And then they revealed that they are planning to shelter there for the night. Are you going to settle in this city? Yes. Our son lives, is married, and we are to stay with him. His name is Murugan, we said eagerly. Right? Perhaps, they are happy to reveal that, they are not vagabonds. They have a son here in the city and they are going to the sun, and then the sun will look after them, right? So they said eagerly, they were eager to share that information with the strangers. Maybe you have heard of him. See how naive they are, how innocent they are, right? Assuming that they have heard of Murugan in that big city. And then we feel sorry. Uh, they are quite new to the city and they don't know the ways of the city. All right. Something happened. Screen is not shared, I guess. All right. I think now the screen is shared. And then please don't hesitate to tell me if there are some issues. Uh, right. So we are in this place. Maybe you have heard of him. Okay. They answered in the negative. Ah, well, it is a big city. And after that, we find the description of the premises of the or boundaries of the temple. And there are shops and stalls, food stalls. And then they were calling out their wares to passers by. But most had no money to spend. And then food items, Indian food items are described, what they sell and how they serve food, buttered plantain leaves, right? So Indian background is created. So we come to know a little bit about their food culture and red chilies, fried onion, smell rich, tempting, and then boiling rice. So it's impossible to shut it out and useless to try. And the fragrant smell of food is everywhere. And that made Rukmani experience a cramp due to hunger, extended hunger, prolonged hunger. They didn't have enough food since morning. So there's a cramp beginning in her stomach. And then she held that with an effort, and it turned her giddy. After that, it had passed. Familiar symptoms of nausea began. They are used to being in hunger. So you can write there, they are used to being in hunger. So these symptoms are quite familiar. The first, you can't bear the pain in your stomach, and it gives you cramps. And after that, if the hunger is not satiated, the earlier symptoms give way to symptoms of nausea. Nathan pressed my arm in sympathy. He too looked queasy. Right? So they are too familiar with the symptoms of extended hunger. So they are forced to resist the temptation also, even though they had some money. All right. Next, we find them inside the temple, going into the temple. So they went inside, going with the crowd to whom this was evidently a nightly routine. So they understood that these people they walked with, they were quite used to this routine. So that is their daily routine, like going out in the morning and then coming back to the temple in the evening. So next we are provided a glimpse of the interior of the temple with statues, god and goddess, freshly anointed, garlanded with flowers. At their feet were piled betel leaves, rice, and a host of sweetmeats. These are usual offerings to God. And then luckily, there is an informant. A woman sitting beside me nudged and pointed. The food is given to the poor, to us, when it has been blessed. There's a lot tonight, she added. You are lucky, right? So they are not the religious, they don't feel quite religious at this time, even though they are inside that temple. But all of them are eagerly waiting for food, right? After the food has been blessed, it will be given to poor, poor people. Okay. So there is eager expectation on their part. I saw her sucking her lips in anticipation. Eager anticipation is there. Looking forward to having food. So we'll skip this part. Like, priest arriving and they are with half shaven heads. And then how bells started to tinkle. And then it was the praying time, and Rukmani closed her eyes, praying. Eyeballs felt hot under the lids. I could see beneath them a black rimmed orange glow against which floated the images of the past. Once again, the images of the past revisited her, and her sons, daughter, hut, and the fields they were forced to vacate. The more I banished them, the faster they came. And also, she remembered a dead and gone once like old Granny, and also Kenny, his eyes sorrowful when I told him we were going. And then Sakrabani. I tried and tried concentrating on the prayers that were being said, and at last the images faded. And finally, she was able to concentrate. And then as she thought that, and God and his consort, the goddess, looked at Rukmani benignly, and finally she was able to pray. And Rukmani heard her own prayer, voiceless, wordless, rising up and up endlessly, like the incense which burned perpetually upon the altar. And then finally, when she opened her eyes, there was silence. Silence, earlier there was silence that enfolded, now it is replaced by something else, pervasive murmur. The sound from the suppliant lips and beseeching throats of the multitude. Okay, right. So we learned about some other rituals as well. After that, Right, we find they are handing out the food to a third man. Right, as soon as this was done, the gilded doors of the inner chamber were closed. Almost at once, the people began moving to the courtyard, which opened from the assembly hall. And that woman, the informant, helpful informant, whispered to Rukmani's ear, the food will be distributed there. There is not always enough to go round. It is best to be fast. So there is a competition for food, and there are too many people, but there's a limited amount of food to go round. So she said that it's best to be fast. So you can't be lagging behind, so you have to be in the front. A lot of people had the same idea and were jockeying energetically for position. And all the people are now roused into animation. They are animated with the thought of food, with anticipation. The murmuring silence gave. The crowd burst into loud chatter. It was as if the thought of food had loosened all tongues, and the pushing and thrusting became more violent. You can mark this. As if the thought of food had loosened all tongues, and the pushing and thrusting became more violent. Also underline the friendliness that had existed before was gone. Men and women struggled to be in the forefront, fighting their way with ferocity, thrusting forward with strident urgency. Right. So now they have forgotten the earlier friendliness. Now there's a tight competition uh, to to get the food first. And then Rukmani found herself in the middle of that throng. But Nadan could not compete with them. Nadan had got separated, and looking round, I saw him on the outward fringe among the very old and crippled. And there are very old people, crippled people, and then sick people, and they are pushed to the fringe, they are pushed away, and able-bodied people are in the front. He had never been one for pushing, but Rukmani thought that she could always tell them that her husband is out there, and she thought that she would be able to take two portions, one for her husband and one for herself. Then I saw two men enter, bringing the food, and all other thoughts ceased. And then she was also able to see the cauldrons they carried, huge cooking vessels, and then description of appetizing rice, and then dal pots, pots filled with a mixture of dal and vegetables, which sent forth a most savory smell. And then from a pile beside him, one of the men took out a plantain leaf, not a whole one, but cut into pieces twice the size of a man's hand. Not a big piece, right? Twice the size of a man's hand. A small piece of a plantain leaf. On this, he ladled out 2 spoonfuls pulls of rice, other filled a small cup made from dried leaves held together with thorns with the dal mixture. From the crush one man at a time, as much by pressure as by his own efforts, was ejected, like the palm leaf stopper of a foaming toddy pot, collected his portion, drank the holy water, and made his way out. And after some time, her turn came, but by this time, the level of the rice has already fallen so low that it was only by going close to the vessels that I could see any rice at all. And then one of the men rebuked Rukmani sharply, "Keep your distance. Do you want to devour pot and all?" So he used rough words on her. I must ask for my husband, I thought, found myself quaking. The plantain leaf was handed to me, the rice placed on top, then the cup of dal now. If you would be so kind, sir, I said, I will take my husband's portion as well on my leave. They gaped at me surprised, affronted. The woman is mad, one called out, expects a double portion. Not satisfied with one, the other rejoined in an offended voice, but must try and make capital out of charity. I do not, I said. I have a husband and he is here. I ask only for his portion. If he is here, let him come and we will serve him in his turn. We cannot hand out food to everyone merely because they ask for it. Do you take us for fools? Keep your tails for the unwary, cried one, and the other called out impatiently. Hurry up, hurry up. Do you want to keep us standing here all night? Right. So they did not believe Rukmani, but she was telling the truth. But actually, she did not know how to tell lies. But of course, they thought that she was trying to deceive them and they were offended, they were angry, and even asked her, do you take us for fools? And then you are trying to take away extra portion. Right? Yeah, one even complained that this woman wanted a double portion, expects a double portion. Okay. And then Rukmani had to be satisfied with her portion. Right. So one of the women said consolingly, they were sharp tongued tonight. Probably they were tired. You must not mind. So there are sympathizers around. There was a murmur of assent, except from one man who said in a hostile voice, well, they are right. Everyone must come in his turn know who is to know the truth from a lie when people ask for more than one portion. And again from the easily swayed crowd came a murmur of agreement. And we can see that these people don't have their individual opinions, right? When one person says something, they agree. When another person says something totally opposite to it, once again they agree. I must justify myself in the eyes of these people. This is the dignity of Rukmani, because she knew that she was not trying to deceive them. I thought fall only, and I said, I spoke the truth. My husband is here. See, he is coming to me. And then Rukmani was able to see him coming, and I also noticed that he was not carrying anything. Still, it was good to share what there was and eat. Good to have food in the belly. Good to feel the dizziness replaced by well being. And then they had to share that portion barely enough for one person. But still, Rukmani and Nadan was not bitter, right? So they were satisfied with what they were able to get, right? So after that, leaves were thrown to the goats who are waiting to be fed. And then after that, they washed and came back ready for sleep. It was only then that we remembered with trepidation our bundles. So you can mark this. So they were caught in the struggle for food. So they almost forgotten their bundles to check on the bundles. But now they remembered their bundles because now they are about to sleep. So they kept their things propped against one of the cowed stone pillars. And then they went to that place but didn't find their possessions. And first they thought that they have a very faulty memory. Perhaps they had kept their bundle somewhere else in a similar place. So they were checking the places, similar places. There are so many, one is like another, I thought. To the next and the next and the next. There were hundreds of pillars and columns, and we went to them all with fast dying hope. Now they are almost hopeless, right? So they were moving from one pillar to another in search of their possessions, right? And then some noticed that they were searching for their things. So few joined them. And then there are some advisors and helpers close by. And they were asking certain questions. Are you sure it was this fall of pillars? There is another on the west side of the temple. Quite sure we have not been on the other side. How could they? Said a scornful voice. That side is locked tonight, at night. Who was looking after the bundles? No one, no one. We left them untended. So they did the initial mistake. So the bundles were left unattended. Untended, looking for trouble, that was. There are many thieves and strangers about these days. Can you underline? There are many thieves and strangers about these days. Underline what even in a temple we did not think. That was something they never expected. They expected to find humanity and goodwill in God's house, in the temple. But then shocked to realize that, and they were robbed in that temple, inside the temple, in God's house, just in front of the eyes of the God. And we can see the difference between the religious ideas of these rural people and their religious sentiments of the people in the city. And there are so many others, they not thinking of anything, or they were not feeling guilty about doing something evil in the temple premises. So their things were stolen and somebody inside the temple had done it. And then so this is something unbelievable, even in a temple, even in a temple. Many kinds come here. There can be no guarantee of their honesty. It appears not. Nathan said heavily, our possessions have gone. And then they found that it was useless to search further. And now they are exhausted. So they abandoned their search. Right. And the vermilion and white striped wall we had foolishly thought meant safety. The promise of shelter had been kept, however, food and somewhere to sleep. So they had to be satisfied with what they have. Like at least they were given food, at least they had a roof over their heads. So they had to be thankful for these things. And then Nadan is, as usual, is optimistic because he said that they have their money still. Pots and matting can be replaced. Right, but now Rukmani is somewhat cautious and warned her husband not to speak about the money, and then even felt carefully for the money in her waistband. The coins hard and comforting to my touch. We must be careful. He smiled right after the horse has bolted, but I could not smile, and the ease with which he accepted the misfortune irritated me. So you can mark this. This alludes a lot to gender difference. And man actually, he easily uh, forgot it, and then he did not think that as a very serious loss. So he was somewhat optimistic, but not the female. And then she is irritated. Now I shall be wholly indebted to my daughter in law, I thought. I go to her without even a cooking vessel, like any beggar of the streets. And straight away I determined to spend one or two of the coins I felt digging into my flesh at the nearest bazaar, for I would not go to her destitute. So again you can write dignity of Rukmani. So Rukmani did not want to go to her daughter-in-law empty-handed. Even though they are seeking the support of their son, and still did not want to uh, go there without taking anything. Right, so like a beggar, she did not want to go there. Okay, so she went to sleep, and then she was hovering between sleep and half sleep, sleeping and then waking up. So in that half sleep, Rukmani thought that somebody was tucking her arm, and she woke up and found another clutching at her in his sleep. And again she dozed off. And then Rukmani thought that she felt a soft fumbling about her face, noiseless. Right? Somebody was touching with very light fingers. Right? And she wanted to wake up, but she was unable to do so. Finally, she sat up. Sleep and dream alike vanished, wide awake, whether from the fact of sleeping in new surroundings or from the loss we had sustained. I was unable to sleep again. And then Rukmani was leaning against the same wall, and then and Rukmani was able to make out the forms of the cavern gods and goddesses. And she was gazing at the statues of gods and goddesses. To her, they appeared almost alive, their stone breasts gently breathing, limbs slightly moving. Nearly could I believe what I saw, sitting there in the darkness by the temple wall. Okay, so she was there until dawn. So Nathan stirred with the first light, that may have been his habit in the village, getting up very early and then, going to the field just before the dawn and then working there, right? So Nathan noticed that Rukmani appeared as if she had been up all night even though he rested. So she admitted that she was unable to sleep. And then he thought that she could not sleep because she was worried. And there was concern in his voice. Right, still we shall soon be with our son and you will be able to rest. How we may as well start now, the sooner the better. And they went to wash, right? When we had done, we went out the way we had come in. And many shops were open outside the temple, and there are food stalls, and they had delicious food like bread and pancakes, and they smell so good. And then Nadan hesitated, and Rukmani saw him eyeing the crisp golden pancakes, and he coaxed Rukmani to buy some. I'm hungry enough, you must be too. And then Rukmani hesitated because she knew that though the food was tempting, that they should preserve their money because silver coins were few and precious. There's no telling what our needs might be. So her thriftiness came to the forefront. She was reluctant to spend. Still, I could not very well deny him when I had already made up my mind to spend some of the money on cooking vessels. So I put my hand in my waistband to take out the money I had tied there. So she decided that they should spend some money on some food because her husband too wanted to eat some. And then she was reaching for the money she had carefully tucked in her waist. And to her dismay, she found that the coins were gone. And then she was searching uh, again and again in her waistband. And even among the folds of her sari, but then it became very clear to them that money was gone. And Nadan said that she may have slipped the money in the night. And we went back, unhopeful, to where we had slept, but the ground was bare and innocent. And those who saw us entering again laughed and said free meals are only given in the evening, not in the morning. Their laughter changed into concern when we explained what had befallen us. And then, of course, their concern was superficial because it was not their money but somebody else's money. And then Rukmani also noticed the way they looked at each other in a meaningful way, as if to convey that these are silly villagers and they are lost and they are confused, right? And then Rukmani could not contain herself no longer and said sharply there was not too little care, but too many thieves, and saw them nodding in facile agreement. His thieves and pickpockets were very skillful. One needed to exercise the utmost care. And then finally, they are reduced to the level of beggars without their possessions and without their money. So they have now nothing to call their own. Say what we would, past the food stall with steadfast face. That is, putting our brave face, they went past the food stalls, past the bazaar with never a glance, pressing on to reach the shelter of our son's house before worse should overtake us. So now, they are actually battered by the bitter experiences they had in the city and in the temple also. Right now, they don't trust anyone, they don't even trust themselves. All right, there is yet another disturbance. We'll continue. Okay, so the city seems to be terrifying, and the traffic unaccustomed. They are not accustomed, means they are not used to traffic and crowds. And they're screwing up their courage each time we asked our way. And they were proceeding very slowly. Some we questioned would not stop to answer. Others did not know. Many, in trying to be helpful, directed us wrongly. So it was like a wild goose chase, going all over the city, but without coming to the right place. And then they took too many turnings, and so many not to. By the time we had followed the instruction to about the third turning, we were completely lost and had to stop and ask again. I'm a little slow. They speak so fast I can hardly follow. and I cannot remember all they say. So these city people do not have enough patience to cater to the needs of these villagers who are not used to the sights and sounds and the people and atmosphere of the city. If you are, so am I said stoutly, for I also find it difficult. And it was nearly midday. They were by the roadside, sat down to rest by the roadside. And then there they noticed some children playing, dodging in and out of the traffic with a skill and indifference which I could not help admiring. For all their play, they looked as if they had never eaten a full meal in their lives. Right. So once again, we get a glimpse of a suffering humanity, and this time, children. Right. So they are emaciated, appeared as if they had never eaten a full meal in their lifetime, and with the ribs thrust out, bellies full blown like drums with wind and emptiness. And they were also extremely dirty with the dust of the roadside and the filth deposited upon it. And the running sores many of them had upon their bodies. So poor hygiene, suffering, extended hunger, starvation, and then this is actually a very poor quality of life they were forced to lead. So they appear to be street children, and there are sores infected, but they seem to be forgetful of their pains. A patient with them as a bullock had been. The suffering, but then bearing their lot. Right, patient with them as a bullock had been. And they were playing naked and merry in the sun. Merry, that is, until a crust of bread fell on the road, or a sweet meat toppled from an over-ambitious pyramid. When all childishness, lust, all play forgotten, they fought ferociously in the dust for the food. Right, so we can see the same competition they experience earlier experience in the temple is now everywhere. They see that competition everywhere in the city among the poor people, and that is there. The same behavior is displayed by these street children too, and how they fought ferociously in the dust for a morsel of food, fighting for food. Then Rukmani remembered how her children too fought for some food. But time had mellowed the memory or dimmed it. For it did not seem to me that they had struggled like this. Teeth bared, nails clawing, ready, predatory like animals. Right. So when her children had quarrels, sometimes over food, and they were not quarreling in such a bitter manner. And now, even though they were playing together, But when it comes to the competition for food, they were fighting ferociously like animals, completely forgetting their former friendliness. So teeth bare, nails clawing, pretty predatory like animals. So this is the picture of the degradation of humanity. So humanity is degraded, downgraded. They are reduced to the level of animals. And then these children are also very cunning too. But when a man of wealth passed, they were as tender and pitiful as fledglings, beseeching with soft open mouths and limpid eyes, their begging bowls meekly held before them, and altogether changed with an artfulness which surely my children had not at their command. Right? So these city children are adapted to the ways of the city, and they have learned survival tricks. That is, fighting for food, and also they are pretentious as well. When well-to-do people happen to pass by, they put on a very innocent look upon their faces, and then begging in an earnest manner and trying to catch their attention. Right, that is a type of knowledge these street children have. We may yet be forced to that, said Nathan, pointing to their begging bowls. If we do not find our son, never, I protested. A little frightened by his dejection, come, we must be on our way. Right, Nathan is scared of what will happen to them tomorrow. And he said that if they don't find their son, they too will have to do this, will have to beg for food. Come, we must be on our way. And then he suggested asking for these children. And he noticed that they seemed to be bright and quick enough. He clicked his fingers and called. They came with bright, curious eyes, twittering like sparrows. And the same old question, where is Coil Street? And prompt answer came, Coil Street, there are 304. Which one do you see? And now they understand why they were misled. Right? Because there are several Coil Streets in the city. 304, exclaimed Nathan. No wonder we have been chasing our tails. If you tell me the name of the people, a boy said, there are few I do not know. That I can well believe. We are looking for my son who is named Murugan, and he works with one Birla who is a doctor. Right. So they revealed that they were looking for their son Murugan who works for a doctor named Birla. And the boy said frankly that he did not know, or he did not hear about Murugan, but everyone knows Birla. For a small sum, he added, I will take you there myself. So he demanded payment for a small sum. So if you want me to take you to that place, you have to pay me for my services. I have less than you, Nathan sighed. I can give you nothing. Oh, the boy said, disappointed, his voice falling away. Then an idea seemed to strike him, and he said shrewdly, Yet I will myself take you there, and if you prosper, you can pay me. Right? And he agreed on future payment. So I will take you there. But if you prosper, you can pay me, he said. How shall I know you? I'm called Puli after the king of animals, and I'm leader of our pack. I'm as well known as Birla. Right. So, even though they did not know it, they came to the right person. And he's called Puli after the king of animals. And then he's also the leader of that pack, gang of boys. And he said that he was, uh, okay. So there's once again there's slight disturbance. I hope you are still here. Right. Then I shall certainly know where to find you, Nadan said, smiling. But there was an impudence in the boy which was somehow attractive. Lead on, my young friend. Uh, so the others are obedient to his orders because he said something, and they dispersed at once. Follow closely, he said firmly, this child who might easily have been our grandson, or you will be lost. And he motioned us forward. And then Rukmani noticed that he had no fingers but only stumps. Top parts of fingers have fallen out. Only the stumps remain. The disease referred to here is leprosy, which was rotting his body, had eaten away nail and flesh to the first knuckle. And then they prudently we took his advice and follow closely. Although he went at a pace which we found difficult to match. And presently he brought us to a small whitewashed house set in a street on the corner of which stood a church. And then he gave the landmarks, this is a street, this is a church, this is a house. And after that, he turned at once and made off. He sat down and shoulders moving as he ran. And then they stood there looking at the house because they did not know how to proceed. And it looked back at us, neither inviting nor forbidding. Okay. And then there's a servant who took them as servants. Beggars are not allowed here, only those who need. Right. Then he noticed that they were not carrying begging bowls and asked, what have you come for? Our son works here now, then said. His name is Murugan. Murugan. No one of that name works here, doesn't work here. Are you sure? Of course, I'm sure there are only 3 servants employed, and Murugan is not one of them. There must be some mistake, Nathan muttered. He pulled out a slip of paper on which the address was written and handed it to the man, looking anxiously at him as he read, or perhaps pretended to read. For he handed it back quickly, saying, "No doubt it is written there, but you must take my word, he is not here now." And then Rukmani thought miserably, why didn't he write and inform that he had gone somewhere? We should have written, but we had been so sure he would be here. We had relied on it. It had never struck us that he would leave without telling us. And at that time, they were able to hear a car driving up, and then a figure got down, and the figure was carrying a small black bag. And manservant said hurriedly that doctor has come. But then again, they were too tired to make a move. "I will stay and ask him," Nadan said stubbornly. "Maybe he will know." And he stood firmly. And then doctor approached them. And then Rukmani, with surprise, realized that that is a woman. "Be careful, it is a woman." "The trousers," Nadan started to say. But there was no time to say more, and he stopped short, confused, and stammering. And then that woman asked, "What do you want?" And so they said that his name is Murugan, and he had come here to work, but some years ago. And then she can remember this. "He came through Kennington, did he not?" "Yes," I said eagerly. "Kenny gave him the recommendation. He has been very good to me and mine." Okay, right. And we can see that now they are dying for news. Mm, right. And then doctor uh, said that, "Of course, you are anxious about your son. I'm afraid I cannot help you. He left here nearly 2 years ago." Right. So they were informed that he had left the place about 2 years back. And then that made her wonder, where could he go? Why go with no word to us? We stood mute and miserable. At last I felt I must know, has anything happened? I mean, had he done some wrong? Because he is dismissed from the hour, and she wanted to know what caused it. No, nothing like that. He was a very good servant and he went after higher wages. Right, so you can see how the actions of people are governed by money. And there's a totally new set of values operating there in the city. That value system is now based on money. And then doctor said that she had heard that he works for the collector. He lives on Chamundi Hill, and collector is an top administrative post uh, in colonial India. He lives on Chamundi Hill, she added. Anyone will show you the house this big enough. We were at the gate when she came after us. You look faint. Have you not eaten? And then they told doctor that they were fed at the temple. But anyway, she was reluctant to meet shrewd eyes of the doctor. It's a long time since, she said. You had better have a meal here before you go. And then the servant was given instructions to feed them. And after that, we find um, how that man's servant is Das, and how his wife treated them, right? Treated them with love and care. And she is always very cheerful and smiling. And she has several children, but still she is in good humor. Uh, right. So she is very hospitable. Okay. So next section also, what they did when they came to stay that night with Das couple. Okay. So as usual, this Indian female too is burdened with the family and household duties. But again, she was not complaining about it. All right, we will skip this part. So evening came, and Das's wife gave them a mat. For she had persuaded us to stay the night on which to sleep. And sleep we did, the sleep, the deep sleep of those who've been tired, have fed well, and rested well. The next morning early we departed, after thanking the doctor, who was a woman, and Das and his wife, who had cared so well for us. And she came to see us go with the curious eyed children about, sunny and smiling as when we had first seen her, and to this day I see her as she was then, young and kind, with a warm smile ever ready on her lips. Right. So now we find that, how their search ended. Right, their search ended at Dr. Birla's place for the time being, and then they learned that he had left Dr. Birla's place for more money. So he seemed to have been somewhat commercialized, being in the city, perhaps the influence of the city too. Okay then, right. So then, shall we wind this up now?